Hello, and welcome to the great world of Valterra, a highly developed world that, in truth, could always be more developed. It has 4 continents, which you can see on our map, and the other side of the world is just a vast ocean. This is due to lore reasons, and definitely not laziness. This world features a long list of various pieces of lore that have been carefully crafted together by 2 nerds whom, if you are in our school, you'd know very well that we are excellent procrastinators. And of course, as per normal, this is being made 2 days before you present, at home. But we are not here to hear the various opinions we have on due dates. No, whether you, a lucky YouTube wanderer or adventurer, or a classmate, you are here to learn of the lore and the story of a world me and my friend have been working on for the last month or 2. So let us begin this video of tales and stories, and strap in because it's 11 p.m. I just ate a bowl of chocolate chips and we're on DEFCON 3 and I'm ready to go. Here we see our large and detailed map. If you're wondering, each of these continents are roughly larger than my relatively large hand, and I have tried my best to create a very nice map for this world. Of course, the map isn't what we're here to discuss. No! We are here to ponder the lores and histories of Valterra. However, if you would like to know how I made this map, go to the other video. Olgenlog is one of the most prosperous and influential continents in Valterra. It lies to the north of the world with a landscape most similar to Britain or Western Canada in the real world. It is home to vast forests, or at least it was, and did I draw these forests? No, I'm not cringe. However, many of the forests of the land of Olgenlog were destroyed long ago anyways in an industrial crawl. And that is, in fact, the most unique feature to Olgenlog in this world. It has no forests. Yep, that's it. Okay, to word it more interestingly and honestly, it's industrial, by far, the most industrial continent, and the most colonial. Despite these common tendencies, it is divided, crazily, into several factions. This continent has the majority of the lore we wrote centered around it, and I, a person very fond of daydreaming, often find myself retreating back to it, because I made it. And so I love it, and you should too. Of course, unfortunately, I can't make you feel things through the internet yet. However, I can share the history of this continent that are truly an amalgamation of my experience and work. Could it be more to an infinite scale? Yes. However, we are unfortunately limited by our time as squishy little humans, so I will speak to you in a reasonable way. First, to start us off, we will be splitting this continent into about 4 sections. Then we'll move on. To begin, we will look at the south of Olgenlog, our dieselpunk continent. If you're unfamiliar with dieselpunk somehow, think World War II, but with sci-fi with cool airships and funky machines. It's highly likely you've seen or watched something dieselpunk. So, what is special about southern Olgenlog? Well, it is home to one of the most influential and powerful kingdoms of Valterra, led by King Oberon. This kingdom is known as Mersner, and though it's written Mersner, it's pronounced Mersner, with a funky little accented E. So what's so important about this kingdom? Well, they're the most powerful. Weren't you listening? Well, I'm sure you're asking yourself why they're the most powerful, and it's not a short answer. Well, I could shorten it for you, but that sort of defeats the purpose of this project. However, you do need to know what made this small, well, huge kingdom what it is today. Well, it's due to various political things, lucky resources, deposits. However, science played a major role, a very important role, in the development of Mersner and Olgenlog as a whole. Though this kingdom is relatively ancient and could be traced back to the long-forgotten medieval times of Olgenlog, it was mostly a minor nation for most of this time. However, in the 1200 ALAs of this world, roughly the late Second Industrial Period, akin to our 1910s. By the way, ALA is a time measurement. Essentially think of this as our BC and AD, or CE and BCE if you're a dweeb. Anyways, in the 1200s, a collection of engineers were gathered around, probably some fancy wooden table, in an opulent room that cost 10 times the lives of the people who actually built it. All were sipping from their crystal glasses, laughing, when a real engineer walked in, George Dwa. Some sources would say he was drunk, others that he was being normal, and they just mistook his junction accent for drunkishness. So basically, this engineer came to these guys, who were all looking for something to get them invited to the king's next big party, and the engineer said, now this is implication, hey, what if we combined a calculator, an oil-fueled engine, and threw in a hydraulic press? Here's a blueprint. And then the room fell quiet for a second, while everyone looked over the paper. Now, at the time, there was 2 types of engineers. The ones who were fancy and had diplomas and stuff, and the ones who weren't cringe and had spent their whole lives working on trains and engines, as well as occasionally a vehicle. So all these fancy types were like, yeah, and they all kind of just looked at each other wondering what to do next. And then when suddenly, a certain man stood, a certain Arthur Baring. Now, if you knew Arthur, which I do well because, well, I created him, you would know he was okay with engineering, pretty good with calculators, and amazing with people skills. No, not kills, skills. So him being the entrepreneurial lad that he was, quickly stood and took the blueprint. He looked over it, checked it twice, made sure if it was naughty and nice, and was like, hello, sir, this is mine now, and so it was. Most people who argued with Arthur, now this is a little secret between you and me, would tend to disappear with a relatively swift timeline, and after some quick and snappy conversation, suddenly Sir Arthur Baring was the inventor of the Great Petroleum Core. So anyways, let's move on to petroleum cores. Well, at this point, I'm sure you're wondering if you're in my class, is this going to be a fun video? Well, I certainly think so. In fact, as I write the script at midnight, I feel myself practically passing out at how good it is. So I'm sure you'll love me ranting about oil engine technology for the next 10 to 20 minutes. And yes, Chad, watched an hour, 30 minutes of videos on how real oil-powered stuff works. Unfortunately, I'm sure none of you would want to hear about... What's that, teacher? I can do what interests me. Well, I'm going to assume that gives me full permission to essentially be free and do, what interests me, which is rant about petroleum cores and how cool they are. So petroleum cores, the technology not stolen by Sir Arthur Baring, is a very crucial part of Olgenlog, and you may wonder why is it crucial, and it is really important. Well, yes. An engine that could theoretically do its own calculations to ensure precise timing, proportions, percentages, and pressures, PTPPP, would be very useful. Essentially, these cores, and they're efficient too, are capable of both providing power, precision, and self-made calculations to execute assigned task, PPSMCEATs. So now that I've briefly touched on the PTPPPs and the PPSMCEATs, I can explain why this is useful. Engines or cores like these allowed essentially basic AIs to be produced, which would be very possible, and they would very possibly rival some of even our modern AIs. Also, I'm not using this as some hand-wavium to allow me to save the mega airship nuke to the mega mech. No, this is very serious, but maybe I am. So, petroleum core is a very useful technology. What is the use that one may have? Well, you could be used to make a very nice power generator. Build a big one and power a whole town. A big one could also power a very large factory that makes more of them, thus creating an infinite cycle of raw power. You could also build a smaller one with a bit more of that calculator in it, and create what is called an automaton. So, these automatons are basically big, hunky, strong, handsome... Sorry, I'm talking about myself. Automatons are these very powerful and relatively intelligent machines. While they can't hold a conversation and they wouldn't beat any chess grandmasters anytime soon, they could place around about 20 to 40 workers per unit. So you can see why these technologies were rushed, especially if you're a big business kind of guy. I will talk about automatons more right away, but what else can petroleum cores do? Well, they can make things like trains, airships, factories, dams, really big guns, and tanks go fast and go power, but you may have noticed these are all relatively large vehicles. Well, when a quiet town engineer was simply tending to her farm, she was about to start up this big steam-powered tractor, and when starting it up, a piston misfired from the engine and impaled her foot. Now, most of us would just never touch a tractor again, but she decided to show steam engines what was what, and after a quick hospital visit, and being fortunate enough not to be put in a medical show, or catch any strange diseases, this was a Victorian-era hospital after all, she then went and purchased a petroleum core. Now, her family, when learning a good few thousand just disappeared, weren't too happy, but she cared not, and Olivia Anders would go on to shrink the petroleum core into 3 smaller types. The tortoise type, which is about the size of a real-world small car, not a cop, car. The star type, which was the most efficient of the smaller variants, and also about, also about the size of a cow, but flat. And finally, the ghost type, a very small core, about the size of a wine bottle. This is important. Now, do keep in mind that petroleum cores are about the size of a cargo container or semi-truck, at the smallest. So these cores would go on to change the world, of course. She didn't keep the patents for long as the Engineers Club came in and said, yoink! She did walk away with a good few million, which would be a lot in our money. So, these new cores, what were they good for? Well, automatons now costed about 1/5 as much, which led to some, quickly repressed communism, and could allow more efficient and smaller automatons. No longer was an automaton confined to the dirty borders of a factory, but was now allowed to roam free the great streets of the cities of the world. These cores also allowed for various things like power armors, cars, and not as bulky planes, but we'll get to those later. Just kidding, I'm going to do them now because I want to talk about big stompy things. As you can see here, we have some images that I definitely made and am in total ownership of. That's a lie. And these images are as accurate as I could find to what I'm envisioning. Unfortunately, it seems not too many people draw realistic depictions of airship armadas, so we have to look at the flying boats. Okay, where shall I begin? Well, seeing as I'm on slide 10 and knowing people on the internet, they want me to talk about big stompy stuff. So I will talk about absolutely lovable automatons. The automatons are a key part of Olgenlog. These towering robots are 3 or 4-legged hulking machines. They feature a petroleum core that is at the center of their body. The automata are used as construction vehicles that step across the cities, farms, factories, and battlefields. With carefully calculated steps, the machines move from job to job, doing whatever they can to benefit the empires. They use their various arms and tools built into the core to build and demolish and repair anything and everything. The four-legged ones are often bulkier and large, reaching 5 to 15 meters in height, and prioritize heavy lifting jobs as well as construction. The smaller three-legged ones are more nimble and are made for precise tasks, such as maintenance of various wires as well as protections of vehicles or to repair electrical systems. They can also climb at the sacrifice of the building they're climbing. They often reach about 10 meters in height. Automatons can also be retrofitted to be mobile homes as well as walking outposts for both military and personal use. Many people also buy automatons, whether for their own company or just personal use. Automatons usually cost around 10,000 IC, or imperial currency, or about 100,000 Canadian, depending on class and quality. The smallest automatons are meant for vents, and the largest for building airships and ships. There are also big stompy robots that go, what's not to like? Well, that's plenty about big stompy things, even though I didn't get to mechs yet, which, just to sum it up, they're like automatons, but like 2 legs and have big guns. Let's talk about power armor. Across the world of Valotera, there, from the streets of the great city to the castles of Alenthi, to the wasted battlefields, there was a war and there was strife. And try as they might, the nations of the world could not quell the many threats to the realms. So in the year 1276 ALA, the great engineers of Mercenaire worked to design a second form for the most experienced of soldiers. The engineers created an exosuit of power armor that would run off a Ghost-class petroleum core. This is why it's important. And could greatly enhance the ability of a soldier. Power armor looks very similar to medieval plate armor, just with various tubes as well as mechanical pieces near the joints. You've seen plenty of power armor in shows. The armor's machinery allows for people to be able to move items with weights into the dozens of tons. The armor also can take several magazines of small arm fire and resist a few shots from heavy weapons. The armor is also good for recon with a built-in radio system within the helmets. The high-end suits also feature small rocket engines capable of slowing a fall or allowing for a jump about 2 dozen feet in the air. The suits are very expensive to make and cost upwards of 100,000 IC to create each suit, without additional upgrades included. The suits are used for everything from large-scale trench warfare to special operations, as well as certain construction tasks if you're really rich. The suits have a few weaknesses, and it takes about 100 infantrymen to defeat one, depending on the equipment, suit, and soldier skill. There are several models and upgrades that can be made to the suit depending on the owner and the suit's role. However, the suits have a weakness to fire due to while they're being full of oil. Duh. Okay. Now, I've kept you on this slide for some time, so I'm going to switch slides, but no, oh viewer, we aren't done with technology. Airships, the coolest piece of 1870s to 1930s technology ever. Now forgive me for the lack of images, because, well, most of Google is full of AI images that look more like balloons. Oh, they're photos from 1910 propaganda, so you'll have to bear with me. Alright, I'm going to read you a quote now, and yes, this is a quote made by me. I'm just drinking water version. As the battle raged, a great shadow was cast down on the burning fields. For a moment the sound of gunfire ceased as the guns turned upwards. For above the field was a great airship, a hulking steel and gas machine, casting upon my company a menacing shadow. And as quickly as it arrived, it released a horde of fighter planes and paratroopers. For us, salvation had come, and for the enemy, death. That quote is from Sir Gideon, The Burning Men of 1390, a book that I started writing, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this, but I will eventually. The airships of Valterra are a cool and major part of the world. The empires use them as military beacons capable of casting force across great distances. Some airships are huge and can fit entire army bases on them, whereas some are small and can only fit maybe 30 crew. Every airship class has unique roles and abilities, from cargo transport to civilian transport to warfare. They are truly versatile. Most airships have their decks below the balloon, however, more advanced airships are built all around the craft itself, and have decks with airstrips. The airship classes usually are just variations of a core idea. Bombers have multiple, and so do different types of cargo ships, and so does every other role one could think of. Some personally owned airships just have made-up classes to sound more legitimate at customs. More powerful airships often have a power armor company to give them even more of a threatening presence. Though don't mistake the setting for one of those YA books where everyone has airships. No, these are expensive, dangerous, and costly machines, though totally worth it. And they are beautiful. However, they certainly won't be replacing the vast navies of the many nations of Oldenlog anytime soon. Sorry, what's that? I meant to be talking about just Southern Oldenlog and not all their technology. Well, I guess this was a tangent. However, it's for the best, as I won't have to explain it again. Since you all know very in-depth the technology of Oldenlog, I guess I can talk about it itself. Here we can see southern Oldenlog, very nice big thick mountains as all good maps have, and a fair dose of named cities. That'll change later. So what's special about southern Oldenlog? Well, as you can see written in big letters is Merchner. It's situated here. In fact, most of southern Oldenlog belongs to Merchner. Vast rolling plains and tall mountains make for defendable territory and a good helping of near-surface oil and coal allows one to become quite prosperous, though it does lack in farming ability. So, this empire, when you think of it, I would want you to try and envision something like the British Empire, but mixed with that 1950s American spirit, and sprinkled with various technological gaps and leaps. For example, one may see a gaggle of peasants arguing over a cart's price as an automaton more advanced than every robot we have today carefully avoids stepping on them. This is the beauty of Merchner. Otherwise, southern Oldenlog features a few remaining forests, mostly in the more distant parts of it, and it is also home to the largest city in the world, Inwell. This well-off city is huge, spanning nearly 100 kilometers across, and is home to dozens of millions, all piled close together and living varyingly good lives, some bad, some great, really 50-50. So why is Inwell so big? Well, in the early days of Merchner, as it began to leave the Renaissance, it began to attract a major population for its beauty and resources. Slowly, over time, it would grow, and eventually people just wanted to live there, sort of like New York, just cooler. The city itself features various districts, and though that may sound YA again, I assure you, it references to city zoning areas, not resource camps. The downtown of District 1 is quite overpopulated and features thousands of buildings nearly piled atop each other. Think downtown Hong Kong, but they were given an area the size of Beaumont to build. Anyways, other than Inwell, you can see a vast complex rail system here, as well as dozens of smaller towns, as well as major front line with Nordson. I'll get to the wars later. Oh, and just so you know, all of Oldenlog is very much like Europe in the 1800s, an imperialist, militarist land full of empires, which is beautiful. So, what makes them colonial? Well, you can't colonize your neighbors, that's cheating. So we need somewhere to get land stolen from. Ah, what a beautiful set of Madagascar-sized islands. Oh, look, there's a series of beautiful rainforests and lush plains. Oh, and is that surface-level iron? How nice! And is that a primitive native population that could be exploited? Well, I'm sure nothing bad could happen to this continent. Hippity-hoppity, your land is now my property, said the various empires of Oldenlog to the people of Tongariro, as they colonized all over the place. That's right, we got the classic feudal tribe. Feudal bad, tribe good. Anyways, so yes. It's hard to make colonial empires without them having something to colonize, isn't it? So we had to introduce a lovely little land of Tongariro, thus subjecting countless to pain. The nations of Oldenlog weren't too kind to the locals here yet, and many survived, fleeing to the lands of Elenfi. However, for those who remained in the early days, trade deals and evictions awaited. However, as time went on, slowly more and more of the natives died out of both natural causes and by the hand of the empires. Merchner was much kinder, offering nice eviction notices before turning sacred forests into super cool factories. However, Nordson wasn't as kind. I'll get to why later. But for now, I want to tell you a bit more about Tongariro. This land is beautiful and lush, much like Hawaii or Florida, or the mystic land of Texas and northern Alberta. If you're wondering how those go together, really close, don't. I made it up. So, Tongariro. If you were to visit, you would likely see a nice resort or two being attended by people who made more money sitting in a chair for an hour than you did your entire adulthood. That's the kind of L for you. You could also enjoy a nice coffee or a pie. Yes, Tongariro invented pies. I just made this up. It was a delicacy of the peoples of the more advanced tribes of the lands before, the colonialing all over the place. You could also go visit a dope as heck tundra where an automaton roams the cold wastes, or you could go to a nice tropical island just north of there. What's next on the list? Oh, we have geopolitics, or perhaps the Industrial Meeting Summit of 1390? Nah. How about... Oh, I still have the rest of Oldenlog to do. Well, this will be a very long video. Well, I'm going to split the land into two more sections, the East and West. I'm going to do the East first, because best to get the racism out of the way, and then tell you about the pretty mountains like the average historian I am. If you ever watched something Dieselpunk, you know exactly where I'm going after you saw the big factory and gas mask wearing troops with red on them. This is Nordson, our more evil empire. It is cliche, yes. It is based... Is it based? Yes. I'm actually not going to say that. I'm going to say no for now. Nordson is essentially an equivalent to Second World War Germany in the real world, just with the difference of being feudalistic and cooler, which Germany was pretty close to being feudalistic too. So So what is Nordson like? Well, if you're the perfect representation of presentation, you will live a good life, often respected for simply being born. You will be praised and worshipped by those around you as you worship them for being, well, around you. United only under the idea of you are perfect, and all those not of your specific race and culture are out to destroy you and mutilate you and show you what is to spare. So you must protect yourself. You didn't start these wars, after all. They did, right? Well, no, you stupid racist. They didn't, because King Dresden's grandfather decided it would be a great time for racism, so he eviled all over the place. Tongariro, bam, kick out the natives. Olgenlog, bam, time for war. Mercenaire, their name's dumb, bam, decades-long war. So if you can't tell already, these are bad guys, because it's easy to make bad guys. And they do it in style, as all dope bad guys do. Mega buildings and advanced technology will easily convince your average Redditor they were the good guys all along. And I pray you don't live in Osnick, because that's basically a really big work camp. Anyways, what can you expect to see in eastern Olgenlog? Well, we have some nice mountains, including the tallest one in the world, reaching very high far above the clouds. And we have vast forests that are beautiful and maintained, definitely not by slaves. You can also dine on some fine wine from Osnick. What is it like there? Don't ask. You can also see the ocean, though most beaches here are gravel. You will find a nice, cool ocean to dip your feet in. But don't swim too far, the naval mines will get you. Now, we go to Western Olgenlog. We're going faster now. Oh, thank God, we're almost done. I hope I get to go to bed soon. Western Olgenlog is home to the kingdoms of Fakamar and Sharan, which I'm just realizing I have no pictures of Sharan. Well, we have imagination for a reason. Imagine a bulky peninsula with some mountains. Okay, Fakamara is a kingdom, much inspired by Italy. Just actually capable of war and imperialism, and not some small colonies. So this empire, led by Queen oh, they don't have a queen. What happened? She was assassinated. By who? An angry grandpa? Why? He wasn't fond of the wheat tax? No, well, sounds fair. Can't be obstructing the grain. So yes, they're currently in political crisis. However, the people couldn't care at all, because they have a dinner party on Sunday and have some extended family visiting. Ah yes, Fakamar, the nation of which enjoys its partying, food, and political randomness. I'm sure their neighbor is just like them. The echoes of screams of the many were the first things Sovereign Damorari heard when he came into the world. They echoed across the vast, lush valleys of his clan as the noise of gunshots and sword echoed across the forests. And from that moment he knew that this land had to be united, and so it was. For his whole life he built around him a following, a near cult, to go against all the many warlords of Sharan, and reclaim what was once his great descendants' lands. That's a quote from the Book of the Sovereign. The first Book of the Sovereign, to be exact, a series created after the unification war of Sharan. Sharan is a relatively unstable nation with vast amounts of people under it, and a thick land army. Though they have like 3 small islands of colonial holdings, they are very formidable and will show its enemies no mercy. Unfortunately, its enemies is it a self for the moment that the sovereign dies, and that is very fortunate for their enemies, because when the sovereign dies, it is very much believed the kingdom will plunge into another endless war. They're also inspired by Japan